Welcome to Searching for the Question Live. My name is David Orban, and I want to welcome to the show. We are streaming live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, but I invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can be alerted when new shows are scheduled. As it is almost every day with interesting people from all over the world, in Europe, in the US, in Africa, in Asia, talking about what are the ways that technology is impacting our world and how we can take advantage of innovation, both individually as well as in our communities and in society at large. Today, we are going to talk about innovation in a very interesting area, in a very interesting geography with our guest. Taiwan occupies a unique place in the world as a hub for so much of the production of electronics in a supply chain that is complex and interconnected on a global basis. And our guest today is Jason Xu, who is an entrepreneur and a former member of the parliament in Taiwan. So welcome, Jason.
Good to hear from you, David. It's been a while. How are you doing?
I am very well, and thank you for being on the show. Yes, indeed, we haven't spoken for a long time. You have been very busy too with your parliamentary initiatives. But before we go into that detail, tell me how things are in Taiwan with the pandemic. It is looked at by the rest of the world as one of the places that has been able to keep the pandemic under control best.
Yeah, correct. And in fact, today we reported the first case in 70 days.
Wow.
So the first, before today, we have had the 70 days without any confirmed cases. So today we only reported the first one after more than 2 months without having.
That's fantastic. And I assume this case was from a visitor?
Correct. Yeah, this is from a visitor coming in from Japan. Who have got out of quarantine for 14 days, but still somehow found herself affected.
Wow. Yeah, there is so much that we don't know about the infection still in terms of whether this 14 magical days is enough. It is always a little bit ridiculous when some independent measure strangely corresponds to our units, like it is exactly 10 meters or is exactly 2 weeks. So evidently it is just something that people decided would be fine, but in some cases it is not like in this case. Now, what was the reaction of the Taiwanese people at the beginning of the pandemic? Were there very drastic measures like lockdowns needed, and if not, why not?
Well, obviously we learned from the SARS experience 15 years ago in 2003 when Taiwan was very heavily hit by SARS, another respiratory syndrome, severe respiratory syndrome. And at that time, cities were very much hit during that time. But also at this time, we found something was going on in the early January. And in fact, if you follow the news, we actually notify the WHO for such outbreak in an early stage. So I remember I was in Davos in January for World Economic Forum, and coming back to Taiwan from Switzerland, I already sensed that there's going to be something serious. So after January, the government start ordering border control of incoming travelers, particularly those from China. And obviously, the virus is originally found in Wuhan, in northern China. And so we try to put up the first fence. And so since January, we've made sure that at least we have control on our hand for foreign visitors. So with that, we are effectively tracing the flow of the travelers after they come into the country. And in order to implement a effective policy that all incoming travelers are asked to do a 14-day quarantine and also follow the government procedures in order to have a very strong system that we can track. So we are quite lucky in that sense. But another thing is, since we had an experience of SARS, we also quickly mobilized our manufacturing capability. We set up a production lines for masks and other personal protective equipment, PPEs, such as gloves, goggles, and gowns, for that type of things. And we learned that in the earlier days, wearing masks is effective to fight the coronavirus. So government set up a system, a tracking system where everyone is able to buy enough masks they need and exchange them periodically. And so we make sure that our PPE is in no short supply in the first place. And secondly, we make sure that our people are not too panicking, and by understanding the transparent and real-time update of the status. So I think having that experience for the last 15 years really helped. And also we treat it very seriously in the first stage. So I think that's also contributed to our public health officials.
Of course, even though there were not drastic lockdowns, the economy was still impacted because so much of Taiwan's GDP depends on exports, and for 3 months at least, exports were heavily hit by the lack of demand on the countries that would be buying product from Taiwan. Is that right?
Yeah, I think this is a global situation. I think it's not just any country can live without this pandemic, and it all varies in degrees with which countries are impacted. In Taiwan, our economy is impacted, but compared to countries in Europe or the US, we are less severely impacted. But mostly our export-driven economy has also been hit pretty hard, particularly in the manufacturing supply chain, in computer electronics, and our local businesses such as restaurants, hotels, retail, obviously are very, very badly affected. And we are lucky in the sense that government reacted to this very quickly. Government quickly set up a stimulus package for those who are in need to apply for an emergency fund to get through their this period of time, and also for startups that are suffering during this period. Our National Development Fund also provide a stimulus emergency loan to startups so that they can get through this period. And in a lot of ways, that things like this shows that taking precautions is very important. And also it shows that government must work with private sector, and civil society must collaborate with government and business to develop a effective and efficient mechanism. And this virus is very tricky in a way that it mutates, and it would always be there, and it's not going away. So we need to make sure that whatever we are doing, we don't temporarily ignore just because somehow the season changes and it seems the cases are fewer. But we must treat this virus as a game changer in a way that it provides us with a new outlook into the future, as to what we should be doing differently compared to what we had done in the past. And this is related to how should our public health system be operated, and how should our business be restructured, how should our school, public transportation, even our tax system be redesigned. What about our job rights? What about people who are displaced during this time? You see tech companies who are gaining a lot during this period. For example, like Zoom or other streaming platform. But how do we make sure that technology does not create bias or inequality? And governments must think more agilely, like startups, and use this time to change the game that we are playing, and make sure that whatever models that come out of this difficult period will be a new game changer. And I do believe that good inventions come out of bad times. In 2000, when internet bubble burst, Google was born. And in 2008, when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, the global financial crisis swept over the world. Then that gives the rise to sharing economy companies, hence the birth of Uber and Airbnb and the like. So I still believe that we can work to develop new invention and new innovations, and we need to be building the future together rather than feeling hopeless or pessimistic about the future. And right now, the machine that is probably least powerful is the government, because they are the last to be informed. They are the centralized machine that is slow in catching up the way the virus travels. So we need to work with startups, with AI modelings, with big data companies to understand what is the cause of the virus and how do human beings prevent such a thing from happening again. And what should we be learning?
Very interesting and very important. I think it is also an important lesson for governments like that of the US, for example, or Brazil, that do not seem to be wanting to do anything in order to reform and to adapt all the various types of activities that you mentioned, from schools to businesses to taxation and so on. Now, not a lot of people have the opportunity of or the willingness to go through the type of government experience that you have had in Parliament. Before you went in, you had certain expectations. How were these expectations different from the reality that you met? For example, a lot of people believe that that politics is a dirty business, that honest and the people who are loyal to their cause should stay away from, and that if you play, you get dirty unavoidably as well, and that the compromises that are made give up all the principles and the type of ideals that one would be fighting for and looking at as sacred outside of government. But obviously, that cannot be the truth. And I wonder whether you found the mechanisms in Parliament and of the various commissions that were surprising in some ways, maybe more efficient or more effective than you expected. How was your experience over the course of the years that you spent in Parliament?
So my background is an entrepreneur. So I approach politics, as an entrepreneur, and I actually took on with entrepreneur spirits. So things that I do, I apply the experiences I gained from doing startups. So if, for example, in policy making, I would be doing things, for example, using a lot of tools that people can collaborate and working together and developing solutions by iterating different versions of the ideas. And you are right, in politics, there's a lot of trade-offs, or what we call quid pro quo, or things that you need to compromise with. And I always like to use this analogy, this example. I think if you are watching people playing, throwing mud at each other, and you are looking at them and you just laughing at them, or you are unhappy with the situation, and you look down and you see yourself also deep in the mud. You see yourself, covered with mud. And what does that mean? So everyone in this world is in the mud in a certain extent. So you cannot run away from the problems that you see around you. So what you can do is to roll up your sleeves and just come up with solutions. And instead of just looking at the mud fight, you go in there and helping them, or help design a system that is more effective. What I'm saying is, in a lot of ways, that our world is still very much designed and functioned through government systems. And as a technologist, I could have 1,000 different versions of a utopian world. But you need a system to implement it. And we need to work together to better the system. And until we have more people who are willing to jump in and say, I can be a part of it in changing the way the system works and using whatever tool at hand and with whatever background and experience and expertise. I'd say, it's everyone's business. For example, for me as a member of parliament, I focus on technology policy. I develop laws and regulations for AI, autonomous vehicle, cryptocurrency, blockchain, and cybersecurity. And for this type of things, I think I wouldn't have had the experience as an entrepreneur to affect the change from a national level had I not joined the parliament. And I wouldn't be able to execute the policy in a way that is so innovative had I had not been an entrepreneur. So having the both experiences as a hybrid, a unconventional politician, that really helps, me to charter the course. So I would say I encourage everyone, whether you are an engineer, a teacher, a programmer, an artist, or a doctor, to think about what you could do to change the political system by providing your expertise. And I think there's a ton of ways that you can make this happen. And that's why I say, we need to treat this period as a game changer. Everyone needs to be working together to fix this. And fixing this is part of the fixing the system as well.
The role of government is clear, even though there are those who would want businesses to operate unfettered by regulation. They look forward to a more savage world where any advantage is gained and then hold on without the possibility or the desire to see if an alternative is possible where more people benefit. And those see this kind of unfettered competition, but they don't realize that it will produce blind results, including suffering from people that are blameless, while we should thrive to create systems that are able of being more self-aware and more graceful in including people who are simply either less lucky or being in geographies that are different than the best positioned one. Now, one challenge, though, for government to occupy this ideal role of benevolent ruler is that in times of rapid changes, the understanding of the topics is by definition insufficient. And whether you are an elected official or appointed to be a regulator for some technology, you are tasked with an impossible job of knowing what nobody knows yet. So how can you provide regulation that is imperfect, and how do you improve it so that it can stay aligned with the underlying developments? For example, a lot of assumptions around the abilities of AI are falsified almost on a weekly basis because AI is not only accelerating, I say it is actually jolting. AI is moving on an increasing rate of acceleration. So whatever we believe it is doing more. And the same is true for many of the technologies that you mentioned. So how can a regulator operate under those conditions, and what are the best ways to neutralize these challenges?
Yeah, I think you have a very good point, and that's why essentially I said that we should treat regulations or any sort of policy as versions of software development, and you need to come up with ideas of iterations and using what we call the agile development system to develop policy. Most of our laws written today were written 30 years ago before internet was born. And so you look at the laws or the articles and the clause, they are just so antiquated. They are like dinosaur age. But technology is moving so fast. It is, it's like technology is moving exponentially, but our human system, our legal system, regulatory system, and political system is constantly flat. And so we need to develop a mentality that we need to develop a form of government that is agile, that is flexible, that is accountable, that is transparent. And so in Taiwan, I set up this law called Sandbox, and it's basically allow any new type of technology that can be experimented and tested without legal liability for a certain period of time. And this is especially applicable for new emerging technologies such as AI and Fintech. New emerging technologies that would impact the existing incumbent industries. And there will always be the type of challenges the new world against the old world. And internet has drawn that line that the new world would be fast moving, would be agile, would be changing all the time, but the old world wants to stay the same. So, for example, autonomous vehicle, is it a vehicle or is it a moving computer? Or is this a potential computer person or computerized person that can perform human activities, then with a potential of committing liabilities and responsibilities? Our laws are not ready when an autonomous vehicle hit someone on the street where the judges or the lawyers cannot interpret the data recorded on that machine. And if the data cannot be analyzed, explained, interpreted, and analyzed to show the cause and causation, that means that you cannot judge this case. And this also applies to when a robot performs a surgery on a patient, and there's some technical error that causes the death of the patient. But who is then responsible for such incident? There's no such a thing. So the classical thought would be we will just prevent that from happening. But the technology is so powerful today that it is learning tremendously, exponentially, crunching data, analyzing the data, and it is just going to outpace the way regulations are designed. And this is going to emerge and appear faster than we think.
I think what you said about policy and regulations being developed with an agile methodology is very important. We are not only talking about technology being applied to traditional sectors like communication, or even more recent sectors like finance, where we are now talking about Fintech, and banks are recognizing that computers are not just nice tools for crunching numbers, but they disrupt every function of a bank, and neobanks are now threatening to become a real disruption in the industry. In Europe, for example, there is now legislation that imposes interoperability between banks, so that if you sign up for a neobank platform and you have accounts in other banks, it is compulsory for you to be able to consolidate the view of your various accounts under a single interface. And this is a similar challenge to the interoperability of telecommunications in the mobile sector that the European Union also imposed as a very good driver of competition. So the next step, as I see, is to look at the regulatory frameworks themselves as technology, reg tech, to be accelerated by the same approaches that are accelerating fintech and communications and other sectors. So, for example, every piece of legislation should have version control. It should never be that the final vote at the final hour is slipping through some clause, and since some compromise has been made, nobody says anything, and only after the fact it is discovered that there has been some interconnected consequence that is protecting some special interest as a payback for the vote received. Maybe the outcome is the same, but the version control system should make that very transparent and traceable by everybody and anybody. Or similarly, natural language processing systems in artificial intelligence should be able to analyze and simplify and make readable the special language that very often legislation uses, with all kinds of references and here and there, and this depends on that. It's almost impossible to decipher the text of the laws oftentimes. And that could be also an attempt to stay on top of what is needed, beyond, of course, the urgent need for decentralizing decision-making as much as possible. Exactly because innovation cannot be all happening in the center. Innovation is happening at the edges. If we want to attempt to regulate innovation in any way, that kind of regulation must be delegated to the edges as well, following the same kind of decentralization that is happening in technology. Now, one of your passions that you mentioned is blockchain and cryptocurrency. Are you satisfied of the degree with which Taiwan has embraced this sector? Do you think that more should be done? What is stopping further experimentation, further enthusiasm, in your opinion?
Yeah, obviously, this is something very close to my heart. For the last 4 years, that I pushed very hard on the advancement of the crypto regulations and making Taiwan more visible and innovative with the crypto and blockchain. And since I stepped down in January, we have had a new commissioner on the Financial Supervisory Commission. And he's been quite open and also embracing new ideas. I have worked with him during my term when he was still a deputy commissioner. So I had hoped that he would adopt some of the legal considerations and law amendments that I proposed during my term. And I think today's blockchain and crypto development, I think, are somehow still at a very early stage. Countries are still scrambling to understand the nature of the technology and as well as the implications of its usage. What we need to do is to make sure that crypto is put in the hands of people who need it, and right now is somehow being labeled as a lot of negativity and some extent bad reputation. But I think this is just as the beginning of the internet when it emerges. A lot of people think that, oh, this is bad for our communication or system. But look at today, internet is the single most powerful tool that accelerate the communication and the exchange of information. And I feel the very fundamental philosophy of the Bitcoin, if you read the white paper, is it wants to enable person-to-person's exchange of value, and I really think this is the last mile or the next important step for the evolution of the internet. And also the reason why I think it's important, especially in today's ubiquitous data collecting era, we somehow are exposed to a very large scale that our data, our digital footprint is being collected any minute online and used in ways that we don't know. And if we don't understand it from the privacy and the security point of view, and look at how our digital print is, or so-called digital property, is contributing to the making of the internet commercial machine, and understanding how our contribution to that is turning humanity in certain directions that we don't know if it's good or bad. I think that's a lot of questions to be answered in that area. So reason why I champion crypto and blockchain is more than just obviously countries' economic development. It has to do with how we understand our future human dynamic and our information security is being treated. So I feel right now we still at a very early stage, and I'm still working on developing more thought leaderships, and as well as working with institutions and the governments around the world to develop concepts, for example, on central bank digital currency, and as well as other ways to empower financial inclusion.
What are the latest projects that you are working on now that you have so much more time after leaving Parliament?
Well, first of all, I took some time off and spent time with my family and reconnected with nature. So I've been mountain hiking a lot, but mostly I am working with several global institutions to, number one, develop the cryptocurrency guidelines and the global governance structure. And secondly, I'm advising some startups for their strategy and as well as helping them to fundraise. So there's a lot of things that I think I can put myself to work and provide value and a contribution. And hopefully I will find something I like and sort of settle down. But right now I'm still kind of keeping myself open.
The beauty of being live is that we have comments from people following, and Tufi is saying that we need to innovate in the IP protocols as well if we want to deliver the promise of the revolutionary technology that blockchain told us would be coming. And we cannot rely on the traditional components that must be eliminated. I agree with Tufi in this sense, because there are many bottlenecks in delivering the promise of blockchain that are forced on the system by the incumbents. A little bit like buying Bitcoin with credit cards and being charged 3% because the credit card network is so inefficient that they need a 3% tax on every transaction. Otherwise, they cannot function, which is ridiculous in the 21st century. And this is true elsewhere as well. I saw one of your affiliations in these think tanks that you mentioned with the Blockchain and Climate Institute. So many times we hear a quite ignorant accusation that Bitcoin is bad for climate because the miners consume a lot of energy. That is a little bit like saying that Google should be dismantled because it is better to drive to the library if you want an answer to a question you have, instead of being able to use the search engine because the data centers consume a lot of energy. The benefit of the Bitcoin network in terms of security is so huge that the energy use is actually dwarfed by this additional value, as well as miners are so obsessed by their necessity of making a profit that they seek out the cheapest energy sources, which everywhere in the world are now renewable energy sources. So it is just one example of how these different technologies interconnect. And maybe the Blockchain and Climate Institute is also pursuing this kind of thought leadership in promoting a better understanding of how smart grids and microgrids and blockchain-based tools can really well work together.
No, absolutely. And I think that governments need, shouldn't stand in the opposite side of the technology. I think in a lot of ways, government treats technology as a threat, and regulations are in existence in order to stop the development of technology. But I think we need to understand from the fundamental view that technology, it will always be there, and it will always be growing faster than we imagine. So it is important that we understand it, and then we develop policies according to the development of the technology. And think about, today's financial system is very much controlled with the way US dollars and gold were structured, some 40, 50 years ago. But with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, I think governments are just refusing to admit that there's an alternative financial system that could be potentially more scalable, more transparent, and in some ways more inclusive. But I would say that countries that are quickly in adapting this new form of a transaction system will find itself more competitive in empowering its youth and citizens to have access to resources. So I am bullish for the future, but I'm pessimistic in the way that our human beings are reluctant to change. For example, you see China is is fast in catching up this. They've announced their so-called DCEP, digital currency electronic payment system. It's basically their national digital currency, and they've tested it in 4 major cities with a total combined populations of over 100 million people. And they've tested it in such a scale that they are likely to roll out in the next year or so and provide overseas banking settlements with its own digital currency. So that's the first step, that China is going to decouple US dollars. And with the US and China trade war is going on, and that their technology war is also fighting each other, that this so-called digital currency becomes a new form to change the way that governments or the rising powers contesting each other. So it's important to know this, and having this in mind, and instead of thinking in the old traditional ways, but to be more innovative.
And it is absolutely fascinating how the United States perceived for decades China as only being able to copy technology, while behind the wall, the massive internal market protected against competition gave birth to giants that now are indeed innovating, and the decision capability of a relatively more authoritarian government of rolling out experiments on a regional basis to be then scaled up nationally is now also representing a competitive factor. Alipay is dominant in many places. I was pretty astonished to see a huge advertising covering the side of the Duomo Cathedral in Milan, in Italy, in Chinese language, talking about Alipay and how you could use Alipay in shops around Milan. Of course, targeting the Chinese. So it is going to be very interesting also how the Chinese digital currency is going to behave internationally. What will it mean to own the Chinese digital currency in China? And then, since it is digital, what will it mean to potentially own it outside of China? And what will that mean both from a macroeconomic point of view, from a technology point of view, and of course, what kind of competition it will put on other central banks that will have to accelerate their own programs for digitizing the local currencies, whether the euro or the dollar. And that is only healthy in terms of what Bitcoin is also going to do, or Ethereum, those more traditional cryptocurrencies that we love. So, Jason, thank you very much for being with us on Searching for the Question Live. I will say goodbye to our viewers, but please stay on so that when I stop the live stream, we can also chat just for a few minutes on our own.
Okay.
So thank you very much, everybody, for being on Searching for the Question Live today, hearing about technology, innovation, policy and regulation in Taiwan and beyond. What is the role of government and how government can aim to upgrade its processes for policymaking so that it can stay relevant and close to the needs of the 21st century. Thank you Tufi for intervening and saying hello for both Jason and I, and for your interesting comments. If you or other of our viewers want to join, we have a Discord community. You can go on davidorban.com/Discord to keep conversing about these themes and others that we are also covering on Searching for the Question Live. If you speak Italian, I also have an Italian language channel, davidorban.com/YouTube Italiano, allows you to subscribe. And if you find this, as well as other content that I create on video or audio or written or in other forms valuable, go to patreon.com/David Orban to become a fan, a supporter, a sponsor, or a benefactor at the different tiers that are available to you. So thank you again, and see you next time on Searching for the Question Live.